Te me tutahi. Te me tutahi a kei te mihi kia koutou e kua tai mai nei I tēnei wā, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou. Kia wātou hui, mo te Maru o Kaituna River Authority meeting. So just welcome to the members and staff and our visitors, our manuhiri, who are with us today, and just like to welcome you to our hui. I remind members and staff and visitors that the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. Also, for members, can you please keep your cameras turned on, raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, or your virtual voice, your real voice. But with the idea that if you keep your microphones switched off unless you're speaking or wanting to speak. Kia ora. E mihi mai, ka timata ka mātou hui mo te karakia. He unuhia ko te tūmo, ko te paurata, ko te pauwhakaurahanga ki te tōngā. E mana ka raki te tau I kōkiri ki te matume hoki ki te ora. Ki mihia. Whanno haramai te toki, haumia huikie.
Ai, ki
Kia ora tātou. Just apologies, so it's a call for apologies, or any apologies. We do have one from Vicky. And Commissioner Bill, is that you, Shad, or was that your raised hand? Kia ora.
Kia ora.
And using my virtual voice here, Dean, I have to leave early.
Early leave.
Through the chair, Tanya Tapsell had a meeting in town at the council.
Kia ora, Nick.
Dean, apologies from Councillor Scrimger. He's had to attend a tangi today.
Oh, boy. Who was that, Grant? Who's taking? Can I have someone move the apologies?
I'll move.
Manu. Second.
Happy to second.
Nick. Oh, Matamoana. Brenda, can you look for those, or can someone else look for those? Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Aye.
Public forum, there are no other, none received to date. Move on. Items not on the agenda. So there is a new item that's on the agenda, and that's from Chris Ingle, GM for Integrated Catchments, and that's a verbal update on the Kaituna Catchment Control Scheme Advisory Group's work, and linked to Te Maru o Kaituna authorities. So that will be taken following the Chair's report. Number 5, order of business. There's no change to the business, and unless there are new items to be added this morning. Okay, number 6, declaration conflict of interest. So are there any conflicts? No. Moving on. Number 7, which is public excluded business, to the transfer into the open. There are none. Number 8, minutes for confirmations. So if I could have a mover, I'm going to assume that those minutes have been read. Can I have someone move the minutes?
Yes.
And a seconder? Okay, thank you. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Anyone like to raise? Okay, then I'll put a motion to that the minutes are true and correct. And those in favour? Against? Carried. Number 9. This brings us into presentations. First presentation we have this morning is from Niwa. That's the around transforming coastal lowland systems threatened by sea level rise into prosperous communities. So, mihi mai ana kia tātou. Kua tau mai nei I tēnei wā. Tā Sal, Scott, and Michael, and Nekiti, our friend Nekiti. E mihi mai ana kia koe e tarangatira. No mate. So, ka huri atu, I'll hand it over to whoever's going to lead us through this presentation. We do have 15 minutes on that, so I will be timekeeping. So, kia ora tātou.
Nikiti, you're muted, mate.
Use your virtual voice. You're still muted. Can't hear you, Nikiti.
Here we go. Te hoha o te roru hiko nei na e din. Nō reira, atamari e tātou. Huki atu kia koutou e te kaunihira. Puto noi ho te mihi. Nō reira e din, ngā ui tūwhera te taha wairua kia mātou, tā tinana e mihi. Ka tai huri no kia koutou katoa. Ako manu. Hoki maumahara ia hau I a koe. Toa I tono e koe ia hau kia uru atu ki roto I te kaupapa o Māori Affairs. Hey, 1977 te wā. Ngau I ho mai kia hau te taonga me ki te grease mechanic mōku. Nō reira ako manu. Nui atu te mihi. Ma te moana. Kore he ma te moana, kore he ora mo te moana, tēnā koe ma te moana. Tai atu kia koutou katoa. Nō reira, anei a mātou o Taihoro Nukurangi, me kia niwa. Ko Pat Stevens, tangata. Nō pio te tangata rāra e di. Nō te King Country, te rohe pōtai. Tai atu kia Jordan, po ia te mea e mohio ai ngā āhuatanga o te kaupapa. Katahi anō te mokopuna Eva Rika rāko tāsiao. Anei mātou, nō reira, ma Scotty hei whakamārama, nō reira e rauranga tirama. Kau mātua mā. Cad, pai te tūtaki kia koe huki e te? Tēnei te mihi, ora ai te iwi, aha ko te uruta, piki te ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Over to you, Scott.
Oh, kia ora. Can you hear me okay? Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Can you hear me?
Aye.
Ai. Kia ora. Ko Scott Stevens ahau, no Piopio, no te rohe pōtai, te whenua o ngā te mania poto. He pau whakarai tai moana taku mahi, ki Tairu Nukurangi kei kirikiri roa. So, nō reira, e mihi ana, tēnā tātou katoa. So, shall I share my screen here for this presentation? Is that how it works? I'll just do that. If I can. Here we go. Where is it? Share screen. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Great. Okay. Now, what do I do here? Okay. There we go. Is that screen is now changing now? Yep, cool. So Oh, thanks all. I'm going to speak to you today about our research program. Future Coast Aotearoa is the short name we've come up with. And as Dean said, it's the long name is about transforming coastal lowland systems threatened by sea level rise into prosperous communities. So we're really pleased to have this opportunity. We have 5 years of research funding from MB Endeavour research programs. And just a little bit of background about that process. That's a really highly contested fund and no guarantee of success. It's about 15%. So we're absolutely delighted to have this opportunity. And as part of that research, we want to co-develop research components with key Māori researchers and hapu iwi partners around the motu. So the overarching program, it's going to be operationally managed by NIWA, but we've got quite a few research partners, and we'll be joining together a series of focused case studies that deliver new research and tools. So I guess the thing with the research programs is the idea of them is they support ambitious, excellent, well-defined research ideas, which will have high potential to transform New Zealand's future and in an area of critical need. So, when we were developing that proposal and knowing that there's not much chance of success really at 15%, but now we've won the lottery, so that's great. And we recognised, Te Maru o Kaituna, your river document, and that you have goals to restore, protect, and enhance the environmental, cultural, and spiritual health and well-being of the Kaituna River, and that's really aligned with where we're thinking in this research program. It's quite holistic, and at the time I was having conversations with Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and I think Mark Townsend put me onto PIM, and then that led to a conversation, an opportunity to present at this hui on 5th of February, and then working with Dean as mana whenua and co-chair of the forum, we the Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority expressed support for that proposed research. And in the proposal, we said that, knowing that there was no guarantee of funding, we said that we will finalise plans for a Kaituna River case study on a program startup if we're successful. And yeah, we're successful. So we're here today to just talk through what that research program might look like and open the door. So I guess this picture comes actually from Delft. It's from the Netherlands, but it's quite relevant anyway. And since we haven't built a better one yet, I'll use it. But it shows some of the, I guess, the competing interests in our coastal lowland environments. So you got the rivers and delivering sediment and to the coastal lowlands, and they're really a competition space, our coastal lowlands, because they're often really fertile. They're great for agriculture, but they're also, because of the interface with the salt water, it's where the mangroves and some really critical and important ecosystems live. And in the future, with rising seas, the challenge is that that's going to put a lot of pressures on. And what are we going to do about it? Because we can't, I guess the key point is we can't keep doing what we're doing right now. We're going to have to change something. And the real question is, how do we do that? And so kind of that's the crux of our work. And this is a great photograph. This is the Pongakawa Canal over at Little Waihi. And this sort of, I think, really is a great image that kind of represents the problem that we're trying to overcome. So you can see the estuary in the background. There's the wetland. You can see how that wetland is really squeezed up already against the stop bank. Now, where's that going to go in the future? We've got flooding of the farms happening there already. How viable are they in the long term? What are we going to do? How will we actually change things to make sure that we benefit the whole of society in the future. So and when we were developing the research, we recognised quite a lot of work had been done around the built environments and for the sea level rise, but really there was this big gap in the rural landscape about you know, what's going to happen to our lowland farms, what's going to happen to our wetlands, what about the other values aside from the economics that are important, and how do we value those things? So our research program design has 3 research aims. The first one is looking at what's in the road of the rising seas, what's going to be affected, how is it going to, the physical things that are going to change. The second research aims looks at the consequences of those physical changes around what's going to impact the socially, culturally, economically, environmentally, and developing some tools to model those things together. And then the third research aim is around planning and action. So how do we adapt as we go forwards? These are some logos from our current research partners. So you can see, you know, there's a lot of people involved, a lot of expertise, including overseas experts. So just to dig into a little bit more depth about the different research aims, the first one is about the exposure as the sea rises. And the first part of that is to look at how the freshwater saltwater interface is going to change. Now that's a really big unknown. We don't know what's going to happen to the groundwater, for example. And so our big idea here, I mean, there's sort of smaller ideas amongst all of this as we go through, and the research will kind of shape up as we go along. But the big idea is that we're going to, at a national scale, predict what's going to happen to the groundwater and the salinisation. And we're going to do that by joining up NIWA's national water model, which is looking at the rainfall and the surface runoff. And we're going to join that with GNS's national groundwater model and produce a tool which anywhere in New Zealand you can go in and look at for the future where the groundwater might be and the level of salinisation. It's a big, ambitious thing, but it'll really, you know, fill a gap. And we use case studies to drill down more deeply into that. The second part of that first exposure aim, the second major objective in there is to look at this thing called coastal squeeze. So, and we saw that in that photograph. So you've got the wetlands and you've got seas rising, and they're going to be squeezed by the rising seas and the stop banks or the hills. And so this is about understanding where the wetlands are in New Zealand, where are the farms, when will they be impacted by sea level rise, and then it's going to go into some of the processes in more detail around how wetlands actually evolve, survive, and how, so in the future, how can we preserve them, recreate them? So see some of that underpinning science there. The second big research aim is around the consequences of those. So now that we understand where everything is and the timing of when it's going to be impacted by sea level rise, you know, can we model the consequences of that? And the idea here is to look at the 4 well-beings, which is the social, cultural, environmental, and economic. But we also recognise that those 4 well-beings don't necessarily aren't necessarily a great representation of Te Ao Māori perspectives. So, so we've got, this is quite ambitious, and what we're going to do is we're going to build non-monetary values into a dynamic economic model, an existing one. So we can look at evaluating those things, because at the moment, when people try and make decisions, it's really difficult, because you understand what the value of a farm might be, but do you understand what the value of a wetland is? What's its value in the social terms and cultural significance? So the idea is to build these quantitative methods to actually model those, and we've got a really good team to help us do that, including some Māori researchers, whom I'll mention soon. And we want to produce a tool that will allow spatial mapping of these processes, so it can actually be used for planning. And then the third research aim is really how we would do it. But we've got some pretty cool innovations in this. So one of these ideas is to use serious games to develop a behavioral model. So a serious game is like a game that people play, and then they are faced with making decisions. And when they make those decisions, we record how they act. And so it tells us how people will behave in the future. And that's useful because when you're faced with, you can say what you might do, but unless you actually are faced with it, you might do something different. So it's about understanding those kind of behaviors. And then we'll use that to develop a virtual reality tool where people can actually see the future so they can understand it. And the idea of that is we'll build different policies in. So for example, if the policy was to put up stop banks and pump the groundwater and maintain the farms forever, what would that actually look like in the future? And people can see it. Or if the policy was to retreat back, re-establish the wetlands, what would that look like? And then what would be the kind of decision points along the way? But you know, that's kind of cool, techie, and sort of far-reaching. But we've got more practical things in there too, like how we would actually do the managed realignment in terms of actually building the wetlands, doing the engineering around them, the ecosystem services that they might provide, etc. And we'll also be looking at some of the building on from research that's already happened, some of the remaining gaps in the planning process and how we could actually do that and make plans. So the idea is at the end of this, there'll be examples of, we'll have actually made some plans for some of our case studies using the tools that we've developed earlier in the research. So it's it's a big, holistic, ambitious program, but could make a real difference. And we've got a really good existing mana whenua research partnership with Cherry and Rangi from Te Puaha or Waikato. So, and they'll be involved throughout. So Sherry's really interested in wetlands. She's a wetland person, and she's going to look at from soil cores where the wetlands used to be when the river was able to migrate before it got all stop banked up, and she's going to use that to look at the possibilities for re-establishing those wetlands in the future when the sea level rises. And then Rangi, she's done a lot of work for her people over the years, looking at their well-being, and so she's really a key researcher, looking at the well-being aspects from a Māori perspective, and working with the social and economic modelers to get those built into the system. And so I guess we're here today really to open the door for another partnership, and there's an opportunity now that we've got the funding to which I think this research program aligns quite nicely with some of the Te Maru or Kaituna strategic priorities. And so really it's just an opportunity to see if there's things within this program that well, for us to hear about really what your objectives are, and whether what the opportunities might be to co-develop something. Just to note that there are a couple of other case studies that we're intending to work on, but we haven't we haven't made any steps towards implementing these yet. We started, by the way, we started this in October, so it's brand new. Yeah, that's all I've got. Kia ora.
Good. Thank you, Scott. I'm just going to open it up for a couple of questions from members. If there are any questions you'd like to ask of Scott or any of the rest of the team.
If I could start the ball rolling. Your Māori study of Māori worldview, have you taken into account what happened in Hawaii Nui? Hawaii Nui was when the first global warming that happened, and the land mass broke up into islands. As a consequence, we created gods. Haumai Tiki Tiki, Rongo Mātane, Tawhiri Mātea. Tawhiri Mātea was the wind god who created the water. And the water came down the mountainsides. They were the blood veins that led into the main drinking places. So regional parks is an important part of your study because of the aquafilters and those sort of things. The Queen's chain should be a Māori chain. The reason being that the riparians, you should have the right planting along the riparian areas, like that domain belongs to Haumai Tiki Tiki. So that'll stop the pathogens and all that going into the rivers. So the Māori worldview has an important part when you study their gods. And I must commend the Waikato River by Robert Mahuta, because the theory on that was a piko he taniwha. On every bed there was a piko he taniwha. And when you look at it, who's managing the Waikato River, there's councils and tribes along the Tuatila managing the river. As a consequence, when Auckland ran short of water, they tried to throw their line in the water, but they were rebutted because their managing of the Waikato River was far more advanced than any other water controls. The same thing with the Tangiwai disaster. That was a prediction by Ngātaroira when the Lars melted and caused the Tangiwai disaster, where about 120 people. So it's getting the Māori worldview, the integrating of the gods with the landscape, because those experiences came from over 1,000 years, going back to Hawaii. They came to Hawaii Nui, then they went to look for the fish that Maui caught. And that was guided by their gods. Each god had a what's called. And the last point I want to raise to you is that you talked about the quadruple bottom lines. Economic development has to take into account the other four well-beings. In other words, bricks and mortar has to have considerations for water and fauna before they start making these plants, because we're getting exploded by bricks and mortar who have effect on the waterways. Any comments we can? I know I made a statement, I asked a question.
Yeah. Oh, kia ora. Thank you. And I think what you say is really exactly, it aligns with the way we see this research going. I think the gaps are, as you say, in the bricks and mortar do need to make way for the water and so forth. And I mean, I don't pretend to know a lot about the Māori worldview at all, but personally, although we're really interested in actually in doing that and in having researchers and partnerships who can help us to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. We have a question.
Yes.
We have a question from Councillor Daly.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, that's certainly an interesting study that you've got going, or that you're about trying to go. My question is regarding the serious gaming that you're developing, and in regard to developing a dynamic economic model, and in the gaming, will you consider, these marginal productive rural land and how they could be retired possibly, and the compensation required for that, and how that would be perceived, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, those sort of questions are exactly what the economics team is sort of looking at, and those tipping points that are going to occur. So yeah, sorry, just got a text in there, so distracted me. So yes, understanding some of those intricacies of when looking at valuing the different things when things become marginal from an economic perspective is part of it, but also it's also valuing the other side of it as well. So how do you create a voice for the non-economic sides of things and weigh that into the equation? So we'd be looking at all of those, at that sort of thing that you talk about, and some of the challenges for implementation that you mentioned were, compensation, and some of those. So that's a kind of a social thing. So the team will look at those issues that you have mentioned. The serious game thing, yeah, so that's more in the economic modelling thing. The serious game thing is a little bit more about, I guess it can inform that, because if there is let's take a farmer whose land is becoming marginal, they might play a serious game, put them in the different scenarios, and they might make different decisions. And in the serious games we've run in the past with farmers, it's really interesting. They make different decisions depending on their stage of life, whether they've got family they want to pass the land on to, how attached they are to, in a spiritual sense to it. So
Yeah. Oh, no, that sounds great. I think you sort of captured the essence of what I was sort of getting at. Yeah, so looking at it also from the farmer's perspective, but also the community acceptance of that need, maybe to that maybe the land is not as productive as it once was. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got another question from Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora koutou. It's tuatahi kia koe Nikite. Nikite, ngā mihi kia koe mo tō mihi kia mātou kia tātou. No reira, tēnā koe e oa. To you, Scott, thank you for the presentation. And look, one of the things that we're not acknowledging here, and I'm speaking with my iwi hat on, is the challenge we have with our low-lying coastal marae. We have 5 to 6 in the Moa constituency, so we've got a real issue for us here around those marae. So I guess my question to you around your request, how do we do the partnering? Look, we would implore that partnering, even to the extent that we probably need to have you here speaking not just to Maru, but I'd love to invite you to our next Komiti Māori hui to talk about this and to share some of this information with our hapu who are in some of the constituencies only just coming together to talk about the challenges around what climate change brings, and acknowledging your advising that a lot of this study now is needing to focus in rural areas and where Māori land is predominantly cited for what I'm aware of, especially in the Moa constituency. So, you know, it's a big issue for us here as Te Iwi Māori. So really, I guess my tono to you is, yes, we'd love you to introduce you to others outside of Te Maru or Kaituna who will be dealing with the issues close to home for them, and how we share some of the information that you've shared with us today. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora. And no, that's really great to hear. And so, you know, I think that's why we are here today, is to, you know, to seek how we might connect with mana whenua to understand, you know, the challenges that you have, and you know, that'll happen through further conversation. So, and I think, you know, we'll I guess we'll work through Dean as to, you know, as to how we go forwards with that. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. We have another question from Councillor White.
Tēnā koe te tiamana, e koe e te rangatira tēnā koe me koutou hoki e hui mai nei tēnei Zoom, tēnei te miatu kia koutou. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I might have missed a couple of moments when I was distracted doing something else. But in the context of the research that you're doing, I'm aware with our land and water, there are so many research projects going on at the moment as people are vying for the resources to do their research. I'm aware of research from Te Arawa Primary Sector Group that's embarking on looking at the analysis in particular catchment areas around Waikato and other places around the implications of climate change and so on. So I'm assuming that this research, and as Niwa, you are dovetailing in, or there's the opportunity to dovetail into these range of research projects that are happening around the place?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's funny because we often get people asking us, oh, you know, what about this research? Well, we can't keep up with it all, and even as researchers, it's very difficult to keep up with all of the research that's actually going on. So I think when we developed the proposal, we looked at where some of the key gaps were, and but recognizing that there is actually quite a lot of duplication going on. So what we want to do as much as possible is connect into existing research programs. So, for example, if there's, and I guess that's as we come in to maybe do a case study locally, then we would need to be aware and connect in with existing research that is going on.
Yeah, because I think not my concern, but you know, the issue is that there could be conflicting recommendations coming out of research. Sure. And one of the things that I know for sure that climate change and environmental issues are going to impact significantly on how we use our land, and you know, the change potentially to existing systems, or complete change to different land use types. So it's a very, very big question, and as one of the previous speakers said, weighs heavily on the economic considerations of existing farmers who are under some pressure to change, but this thing is coming on rapidly. So yeah, I guess really making sure that the research is well dovetailed and comes up with a cohesive recommendation would be important.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question, and I'm going to make this the last question. This is from Commissioner Shane Ralston.
Tēnā tātou, kia koe ra Nikisi, ka nui ngā mihi kia koe mikira kia koutou ngā kairanga hau, I kororohia nei ngā ahuatangi pāna ki tēnei take, nō reira tēnā koutou. Thank you for the presentation. I've just got a question. It kind of aligns with where Mate Moana and both Te Waru, Te Taru were directing their questions. And it's kind of around the the consequences, so consequences on Māori communities and particularly Māori landowners, and whether there's any consideration around those equity issues, equity challenges that, marginal land in those low-lying areas, a lot of them tend to be Māori landowner areas, and factoring in, and it kind of comes off the back of what the first question as well is that, potential for offsetting and those kinds of things, whether you can deliver other benefits back to landowners, whether they've been Māori or non-Māori. And my other question, well, yeah, it is a question, is around the action. So I assume in terms of action, so thinking about the consequences and then potential action, some of the action may be policy driven, and the effects on and the direction toward regional planning, local planning, and then how that aligns with what's coming out of central government in terms of MPSFM, and at some point in time, rights and interests for Māori. So just wanting to make sure that we're kind of getting that alignment across the consequences for Māori communities, and then also linking into what's happening nationally, but also regionally and locally.
Kia ora, Shad. That's a really good question, and there's a lot in that. So, I mean, I think you sort of hit the nail. Those questions that you ask are really big and difficult questions, and so when we're going for this research program, those were the kind of gnarly questions that we were setting out to take on. In terms of that national scale, some of the things that directed us with that national climate change risk assessment, etc., and the researchers that we've got in the team are tapped into that process. Look, in terms of the consequences to Māori and the marginal land, etc., that was one of the things that we recognise as a key gap. So so there are existing economic models. Gary McDonald's the guy who's got the model now. He recognises that actually he's really keen to build in the Māori perspectives into his model somehow. But at the moment, that's difficult to do. So, and around those equity issues, those equity challenges, those were front and central in the thinking of the socioeconomic research team that's involved in the research, with Paula Holland at NIWA, Gary McDonald at Marketing Economics. So, so we'll be looking to make some real progress on that going forwards. And so part of that, I think, is we need to do that at a local level to start with, and so it's developing those partnerships, and obviously the first partnership we have in that space is with Te Puaha, and I think we've got a really good lead, and they're talking about exactly the same things that you're talking about. So those are very definitely goals for the research there, and then you taking that forwards and into policy, those learnings and informing policy, that also is exactly where we see the big problem, right? So you can have information, but how do you actually make decisions that are going to be right, or that are going to look after the interests, the equity issues for Māori, to balance the needs of everybody in that community, the other farmers and so on. So that's the whole crux of it. And that's part of that third research aim, is looking at those planning enablers, the way you can actually build it into policy, and the whole way that the economic tools will etc. will be designed is with a view to actually how you would actually implement it in the future. We don't have the answers, but those are the questions we're trying to answer as we go forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. So It's early days. Firstly, congratulations to Niwa on the successful funding. I think there are many things. I mean, and it is, you're at the beginning. For Te Maru, I mean, on behalf of Te Maru, absolutely happy to be part of. And as Councillor McDonald mentioned, and Councillor White, I think that extending, I suppose, that out to the wider coast, we're happy to also communicate that however we can and support it. So thank you, the NIWA team, for the presentation today, and have a great Christmas. If you're allowed out of Auckland, I suppose you can. Yeah, so we're just going to, you're welcome to stay to the next presentation, or you're welcome to leave. But lovely seeing you, and thank you for the presentation.
Kia ora.
We'll keep in touch, yeah. Okay, kia ora. Okay, just moving on to our next presentation. Councillor White, would you like to introduce this topic, Quayside Holdings Limited? Oh, sorry, are you outside doing your garden?
I'm just about outside. I'm in another building at the moment, but okay to buy. Hey, look, I just want to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, look, I'll introduce Scott very quickly. Scott obviously is our Chief Executive of Quayside Holdings Limited. I'm the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's one of their appointed directors to Quayside. An important issue that has arisen over time has been the Rangiora Industrial Park, and consultation with iwi has been a struggle. Finally, over the last couple of months, an agreement and MOU was signed with Tapuika. A celebration was done several weeks ago, and opening the Rangiora Park for development. And it's been a milestone in their particular planning. I believe through the chair of Tapuika and associates that a very satisfactory MOU was developed. I believe also that the partnership has started off on a good footing. Conversations are happening. The opportunity for Tapuika and surrounding iwi in the western, eastern and the Rotorua centres, the opportunities for future employment and opportunities for development are significant. So with that very brief introduction, I would suggest that we get straight on to Scott's presentation as to where they've got to in this particular program.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Over to you, Scott.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you, Tataru, for the introduction. Ko taronga mano te kainga naine, ko Hamilton toko i whāroa, so ko Scott toko ingoa, he tahuhu rangapu a ho mo Quayside, and I te tahi whakataki pai ki ao waiho i te toipoto, ka ua i te toiroa. Nō rewa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. As Tataru has introduced, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to come and present. My name is Scott Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive for Quayside Holdings. This fine lady to my left, probably to your right, is Mel Mannery. She looks after the comm side for Quayside. We've left the engineers out of this conversation for another day. If there are any questions, I can always go back to them later on. The Rangiora Business Park for Quayside is a significant investment. For those that don't know, Quayside is the investment arm of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. I'll try and share my screen, hopefully that will work. We've been in existence for a little over 20 years now. 30 years now, sorry. And Quayside controls a number of significant assets, including a majority share in the Port of Tauranga. We are fortunate to be able to provide a significant income stream through to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to support them with their full wellbeing objectives. This year that will be in the vicinity of $40 million. Quayside holds a number of investments across the region. One of those is a land investment in Rangiora, and it's on that I wish to have a chat with you today. So the history of the Rangiora Business Park, well, for those that don't know where it is, most of you will know where AFCO is on the old highway. It's in here. It sits between the East Coast Main Trunk Line and the Tauranga East Link. It is an area of about 226 hectares, but it will yield about 148 net hectares of industrial development. It is an important development in terms of the Bay of Plenty broadly. If you think of it in terms of size, it's commensurate with the size that Tauriko is out the other side of town. And I think in terms of quality, if you want to think about what Quayside's objectives are, they are similar to the quality that you're seeing out in Tauriko on the other side of town. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the history, about how we've got to where we've got to, and a little bit about where we are in terms of that iwi relationship and that development as well. I'm sorry, Dean, before I carry on, how much time do I have so that I can make sure that I live within your time frames?
20 minutes.
Okay, not a problem. So just going back in time, Quayside first acquired land back here in accordance with Smart Growth's desires for industrial land both to the east and the west of Tauranga. Obviously we have Tauriko out to the west. The Rangiora Business Park was the land that was identified to the east. It sits in the Western Bay District Council catchment, and we first acquired land back there in 2003. We went through the process of a consent for land development, a plan change for land development, and got consents for earthworks and stormwater and other pieces back at that time. We also went through some cultural monitoring and understanding of what was required back at that stage. With the financial crisis that came through in the late 2007-8-9, the development demand for industrial land slowed down significantly. What we then saw was the Tauranga East Link was built, which is that motorway that runs adjacent to the industrial park. We then had a subsequent plan change in 2015, and that allowed us to move forward and identify the use of the motorway as being a prerequisite infrastructure. And we've worked subsequently again with the Western Bay Council around water sources for Rangiora. Most recently, outside of the council process, we also had an $18 million grant, which covers about 50% of the interchange to get into Rangiora from the Provincial Growth Fund, and that work is taking place. Where we now sit is we've now basically commenced earthworks at Rangiora. So for those of you that drive up and down the TEL, you will now start to see bulldozers and diggers and other things there. A lot of the work that is taking place at the moment is what we'd call the environmental work at the start of that earthworks process, putting up silt fencing, making sure that all of the work is there. We've had the site blessing with Tapawika. We've got a very, very strong relationship with Tapawika, and that's been developed over time. And we've had a good relationship with other iwi in and around the area as well. Earthworks have started, and I think what you will see over the coming months is for stage 1A, from our perspective, a lot of earthworks taking place. Stage 1A is probably about 16 or 18 hectares. And so the earthworks have started on that. The other piece that you'll see towards the end of this earthwork season is we'll start to work on some of the interchange ramps as well, or the interchange that will work with the with Rangiora. In terms of the distance between the Rangiora interchange and the Papamoa East interchange that Tauranga City is working on, about 3 minutes if you're driving at the speed limit between the two. So, you know, as a employment zone adjacent to a significant population zone, it does offer a significant amount of potential. The other thing that's probably relevant, when we did the application to the Provincial Growth Fund, there's about 250,000 people that live within 45 minutes of the Rangiora Business Park. So that's going down towards Whakatane in the east, across the Rotorua and that central North Island, and then of course back into Tauranga and the border of Western Bay. out this side of town. So this will just give you a little bit of a feel or the plan, the time frame in which Quayside is working towards as we develop this through. We've got plans in place with regards to Tapawika around stormwater planting and around the wetlands area. And I think this will tie very, very nicely with what the previous speaker was talking to. And obviously also acknowledging a lot of the cultural pieces that are taking place in there. From my team's perspective too, we've done a lot on trying to work with Tapawika around the cultural understanding. That's included my team going up Rangiora Mountain and actually trying to understand the history of the land, making sure that we pay respect to the area and the importance of the land that we are working within. There has been multiple engagements with Tapawika and with multiple other iwi during this time, in fact going right way back to 2005 when the Cultural Impact Assessment Report was prepared by a Tapawika representative by the name of Dean Flavel. You know, we're still using that document today, Dean, in terms of some of that impact, and that has informed the basis of that MOU that we have today as well, in terms of some of those considerations. So some things don't change even with the passing of time, which is fantastic to see. Just to talk a little bit about the vision for Rangiora, you know, we want to see a modern, high quality, vibrant, connected industrial development. One of the things that is in our favour with regards to Rangiora, and it's unusual in the sense of taking the opportunity to develop industrial land, is the cost of the industrial development is being borne predominantly by Quayside, whether it's through loan. There is some money coming from Western Bay. Yes, there is that PGF money, but there's $180 million of infrastructure required at Rangiora. There is 148 hectares of net land there. Quayside only owns about 45% of that, but we own the vast majority of stage 1. And the district plan says that 50% of stage 1 must be sold before any future stage can start. So what does that mean? It basically means that Quayside has control of the start of the project, and one of the things that allows us to do is have control over the types of industries that end up at Rangiora. So Quayside isn't just looking to sit there and potentially just sell land for the sake of selling land like a developer might be looking to do. We're actually looking to try and make sure that we flavour the right type of industries for the region into the industrial park, and that actually gives us the opportunity to set a standard. Like any subdivision, the first couple of houses in a residential subdivision tend to dictate the standard for the rest of the subdivision. And we're looking to try and make sure that we work to try and create this vibrant business park as possible that reflects well on the environment that sits in and around the catchment. I'm hoping that this will play. This is a short video which will give you a little bit of a flyer. They're coming through or not?
There's a screen blocking the video.
Yeah, okay. What I'll do is I'll skip over that. Unfortunately, my technical skills aren't going to get me to get that to disappear.
Excuse me, Scott.
Yes?
Excuse me, Scott, you can just on the picture.
Okay, no, that's fine. Look, I'll skip to the next slide. I'll come back to that one. So look, in a pictorial, this is basically what we see Rangiora about. So I know that there's a lot of concern, you know, for the likes of what AFCO is today, for example, that I don't want to see Rangiora like AFCO is perceived at the moment. You know, great employment, but you know, the environmental challenges that these organisations present are high. So we're looking to try and make sure that we create something which works in with the surrounding environment and presents itself well. I guess the key question is, why do we need an industrial park? Tauranga on the Western Bay, as we know, is growing significantly. We're seeing significant congestion through the middle of Tauranga because there isn't really a significant work zone out on the eastern side. We had a number of economic reports that were done during the course of our progress around the plan changes. There's an estimate of 4,000 people to be employed, up to 4,000 people to be employed at Rangiora. And we think that adds great capacity into this catchment. Just to walk through the, I guess the three waters. For stage one, we are looking to utilise the municipal capacity that comes through the Eastern Supply Network, so that's with Western Bay itself. They have a number of other consents which are available to them to put more water into that catchment, and we are supporting that through contribution. I know there's also discussion with Tauranga in terms of options to work closer there as well. We will have some holding reservoirs just to the east side of the TEL, so that basically for firefighting and those other types of things, so that we can make sure that we're looking after the water that we have on site. Wastewater is reticulated back from Rangiora to Puki. There is a consent for that, both for the wastewater treatment plant and for the movement of that wastewater back to Puki. There's other things that Quayside's also doing, probably just in that capacity. And last week we were privileged enough, this week, it's Friday now, but start of this week we were privileged enough to have the opening for an organisation called Aquacuro, which is another Quayside initiative outside of Rangiora, but that is about water and nutrient uptake. And that is growing algae. We've got a pilot line out to Puki there, which is actually filtering some of the water from the wastewater treatment plant, which would ordinarily go through the wetlands and out. And this is taking further nutrients out before it goes through that process. So Quayside's looking at different opportunities, even with this broader remit, as to how we can look after those environmental factors. Stormwater, this is one which is probably a key piece at the moment. We put culverts under the motorway when the motorway was built. There is 51 hectares of stormwater pond allocated to Rangiora on the seaward side of the Tauranga Eastern Link. We've talked with Tapawika in terms of the planting of that so that we can create a wetland in that area. We think that would, and we're also very, very conscious of making sure that we hold water back in certain events to ease the pressure on the Kaituna catchment as well. So there's a couple of little pieces we're working through on that. Obviously, as sea level rises and other things, that has impacts on volumes, storage, pumping, etc. So the team has spent a significant amount of time and money on different modelling for that, and we're just working through the council on the finer points of that. And we'll obviously come back to you with any concerns that we see in that. The park itself has been designed in a very specific way to make sure that stormwater flows in the appropriate ways to the appropriate places. There are a number of resource consents that we have, both existing and subject to renewal at the moment. One of those is subject to renewal that we're going through is our earthworks consent. The earthworks consent was done in 2005. Looked at the whole of the park. What we're looking at now is an extension for the piece that relates to Quayside land, so that we can then go on and continue to develop that. Stormwater obviously has been discussed around that, but we are also just having to make sure we manage the pace of discharge of water from those ponds. So we capture all the water from the park, so that we don't impact the Kaituna and then are able to slow release it out. But we're obviously working with council through that process, and there are a number of other consents that are existing at this stage. So we will talk to local iwi with regards to some of those consents that are in play at the moment, for further support and consideration as those things go through. If there are any further questions, then obviously I'll take some today. We also have a website, rangiuru.co.nz, and you can forward through to us or contact us through that process if you want to talk to me outside of this forum. But more than happy to take any questions. Hopefully that fitted within the time frame then.
Nicely done, Scott, within the time frame. Are there any quick questions? Because there is opportunity to... yeah. So we have one from...
Yeah, I want to know, Quayside's got 3 regional parks that was created around about 2006. And it's fully understood that the Port of Tauranga is Rome and the Eastern Aotearoa is important to the regional economy. But I want to know whether you got those regional parks integrated into your planning documents. That's the first question. Another question is, I'm against foreign ownership.
So look, I guess to discuss the regional parks aren't actually owned by Quayside. They are owned by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. But in terms of the integration, I guess one of the things we have talked a little bit with the council about, with Pim, is around what is the interrelationship, particularly between the potential for the stormwater pond that sits there at the wetland and the stormwater and the wetlands that exist in and around the Kaituna, because there is, I guess as the crow flies, probably only 300 or 400 metres between the two of them. So we want to try and make sure that there is some form of alignment and connection between those. I think your other question was around foreign ownership. Look, the lands currently that Quayside owns is owned by Quayside. We're 100% New Zealand owned in terms of that. We're owned by the Bay of Regional Council. There may be foreign owners on some smaller land blocks inside that industrial park, but they would probably be with whichever industry is sitting on top of that. But look, we're not partnered with any foreign entities or any of those other things in terms of the development of the industrial park.
Scott, we have another question from Commissioner Shad Rawson.
Kia ora, Scott, just a quick one. What's the timing on the interchange?
Yeah, kia ora, Shad. Look, where we are at, we've basically completed the design process now. We've started, we will do some of the work on the interchange the tail end of this summer, and the interchange should be complete in time for that stage 1A. So basically we are looking at mid to end of 23 completion.
To Tari.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Question?
Yeah, no, it's more just a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I'm on the move again, so I've got my video off. But hey, look, I just want to comment that one of the critical issues for Quayside was actually building their cultural capability in the organisation, and I want to congratulate Scott on his attempted PPR there. I mean, they are starting to move in that space, but also looking to acquire internal capacity to help drive some of the consultation and really engage, more in a culturally appropriate way. And so that capacity is really, really important as they actually peel out to actually consult further and wider on this particular big issue. It's a big project, and it'll have impacts both west and east and to the south, to Rotorua, particularly in terms of job opportunities and those sorts of things, Dean. So I just wanted to paint that picture that, sometimes moving forward requires a very strong cultural drive as well, and this is one of those moments in my view.
Thank you, Tariq. If there are no other questions, I just want to thank Scott and Quayside for the presentation and another exciting journey into the future. So on behalf of Te Maru o Kaituna, certainly love to get the updates and that, and I'm sure your relationship with Tokuika should be a good one.
I have to leave, mate, so apologies, mate.
Yeah. Okay, we're now moving into the reports, and the first report is 10.1, which is the chair's report, but I want to actually give 10.2. If Chris is available, we can hear your report first, Chris. That's okay?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora tātou, morena everyone, ko Chris Ingle, tāko ingoa, tumu whakarake rohinga, the General Manager Integrated Catchments for the Regional Council. Probably most of you have met me once or twice in different times. What I wanted to talk to you today about is the river scheme advisory groups that we have as the Regional Council. So you'll probably be aware of our river schemes. The Regional Council has 4 river schemes, including one for the Kaituna catchment. And each river scheme has an advisory group made up of targeted ratepayers. So the work that we do in the river scheme is funded 80% from targeted rates and 20% from general funds. So what we do is we make sure we consult with those targeted ratepayers, because they're paying the lion's share of the costs, twice a year, and talk to them about what we're doing in each of the river schemes and seek their input and their support for it so that they understand. And quite a lot of it is to do with adapting to climate change, as we heard the first speaker from Niwa speaking about. What's happened in the Eastern Bay of Plenty is that we had a submission. In the Eastern Bay of Plenty, we don't necessarily have co-governance groups like Te Maru to rely on for the iwi voice of the river. So we had a submission from one of the whakatauia iwi on our long-term plan, and they were saying, well, we need to be involved in these river advisory groups for, in this case, for the Apotiki area, for the Waikato Otara rivers. So the staff and councillors have been thinking quite a lot about this submission that was made by Ngāti Era, and thinking, yeah, well, you know, we do need to have them around the table. And because there is no co-governance group, we've just thought, well, you come and join the River Scheme Advisory Group. And then, of course, we looked at our terms of reference, which councillors adopted, and it didn't really fit because they're not really targeted ratepayers. So we're looking at changing the terms of reference, and I thought I'd better come in and let you guys know why we're doing that and why we're not thinking of doing that for the Kaituna. And the reason we don't think we need to for the Kaituna is, of course, because Te Maru already exists and it already has that statutory responsibility to be the voice for the river. So we don't want to cut across the authority that you already have around this table. Having said that, I did think it would be quite a good time to check in with members to confirm whether you feel that there is sufficient awareness of the work that the River Scheme side of council does around this table. And I did have a good read of your agenda, and I know, speaking to Pim, that you do get operational reports that talk about some of the mahi that we're doing in the River Scheme area, including things like the Ford Road pump station and trying to improve the water quality in the drainage schemes, or where it exits from the drainage schemes. And I see that's on your work program and within your action plan, Dean. So I'm encouraged that some of the work that the River Scheme is doing is sort of right at the top of the agenda of your work as well. But I thought I'd better check in with members just to make sure that you feel that you are connected with what the River Scheme is doing, and that you feel that you have the ability to have influence and input into the direction that the council's heading on. And just before I leave you with that, I also note that Councillor Nees and Councillor MacDonald are also members on that River Advisory Group as well. So we do have a natural connection there already, but interested in your thoughts on whether you think that's enough, or if you want better reporting from staff up to this group, or if you think there's a gap there, or if you in fact think things are working fine as they are. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chris. I suppose that's part of the reasoning why I wanted, because to hear from what the request that you were putting forward was. I'm aware that councillors Nees and MacDonald are part of that, grouping. I suppose a question to the Te Maru members is, would another member from Te Maru as a representative to that body, the Kaituna Catchment Control Scheme, be required? So I suppose I'm really putting that towards both councillors, whether another member from Te Maru should be involved or attend, and would that give any strengthening of our relationship, I suppose, with this group?
Actually, through you, Chair, just so you know, I'm on the that committee as well, representing the Rotorua City Council, Lakes Council, sorry. So I'm on that currently as it is. For your information.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Mate Moana?
Kia ora, Dean. Yes, I do sit on the Kaituna Advisory Group. I'm a fairly new member about that on there. But look, I just want to comment, since I have been sitting there, in my view, because I'm not solely there for Te Maru o Kaituna, I'm there as a overall council representative, and I think that it would be beneficial to have one of the representatives from Te Maru on there, and possibly you, Dean, because what I think would be also good if the chair of the Kaituna Advisory Group can actually sit with us here in Te Maru o Kaituna, because no criticism to the councillors or members that sit on Te Maru o Kaituna, but I think what's lacking there is the whole cultural understanding of what's important in the work that's discussed around the Kaituna, and having the perspective properly aired from somebody from the Te Maru o Kaituna would be good. And it would also raise the cultural awareness, which I believe is necessary at that table.
Thank you, Mate Moana. Councillor Nees, do you have any? Oh, yes, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I would echo Mate Moana's comments. I felt a little bit uncomfortable in those meetings from time to time when an issue has cropped up that I thought tangata whenua would potentially have a view on, and I don't believe that even though I'm on Te Maru, I can speak for Maori. So I agree with Mate Moana entirely that it would be quite helpful to have a tangata whenua representative from Te Maru who's able to be listening to the conversations, because we are talking about the long-term future of the river scheme. And I was thinking during the presentation this morning from Scott from NIWA, the overlaps between the river scheme sustainability project that's underway and the research that they're doing, and the issues that were being raised that relate to tangata whenua also need to be considered within the advisory group.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Nick, are you of the same opinion?
I 100% agree with both those comments. I feel in that forum it is very much made up, which is awesome. It's very much made up of farmers from that area, which is great, and it represents them well, but probably there is missing that sort of mana whenua, tangata whenua voice there, I suppose, from what I've seen. And like Councillor Nees, I agree. I don't feel comfortable to talk for tangata whenua.
Okay, thank you. Any other members, anything to say? Okay, if I can, and I might be corrected, but what I'd like to do is now go back to the chairperson's report. And in the report, I'm asking for members to be appointed to the Wastewater Advisory Group under Western Bay, which is Te Ohu Palawai or Te Waiari. So there's two members there. The first member is a the principal and the second member being a secondary or an alternative. I'm just wondering if we can maybe extend that into this, extend that recommendation to also include a member, and I'm going to say myself as the chair, to be a member of the Kaituna Catchment Control Scheme Advisory Group. So I suppose that's what I'm going to do, if I'm allowed to, or if I can. Okay, nobody's objecting, so I think I can. So I just want to move then to my chairman's report, and to receive the report from the chair's report, but appoint. Now we may need to have a secondary one in here, a secondary motion. So the second motion is to appoint. So how about I do this one first, and then we'll move through. Eh? So I'm interested in being the representative for this particular one in my report, which is Te Uhu Para Wai o Te Ahoa o Waiari, and I'm looking for another member to be the alternative as representatives of Te Maru o Kaituna. Sorry? Oh, okay. Okay, so that first one, I suppose I'm putting myself forward for the first one, and is there a member? I'm looking at him, but is there a member that would like to be the alternate in regards to the Waiari? I know Ngāti Whakaue and Waitaha are currently members, but it'd be good to have another member from Te Maru on that entity. I'm going to ask Maru if he would like to be that secondary member.
Oh, yeah, I'll accept, but it may not avoid litigations.
Okay. So that's the first point in regards to the wastewater advisory. The second recommendation is to appoint a representative of Te Maru, and it's to appoint, insert name, my name, as a member of the Kaituna Catchment Control Scheme Advisory Group. Okay, so that's the recommendation. Can I have a mover for both those? Okay, seconder?
Aye, Grant.
Right. Okay, in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay, that brings us to 10.3, Essential Water Policy Program, Vision Setting, Values and Environmental Outcomes. Joe Watts. Kia ora, Joe.
Kia ora, kia ora, Te Maru. I'll leave my screen off because I'm at home and there's all sorts of things in the background. I'll just try and share my screen now. So we're on page 18 of the agenda. There's a very brief report there for the Essential Freshwater Policy Program and where we're up to.
Are you there, Joe?
I am here. I'm just trying to share my screen now. Now, has that done it?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So You just have to bear with me. I haven't got the notes in front of me because I'm working from home. But anyway, it's a very small report and it just sets out the next steps that we're working on. And you'll remember, so this is about the visions and values and the environmental outcomes in implementing the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water. And you will have seen this slide before, and it is in the paper on page 18 or 19 there. And it comes straight out of the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water. And you'll see from the left-hand side going across, this is a very prescribed process that we're following. And you'll remember that last meeting we were talking about values, and we had some maps up on the screen, and it was a Zoom meeting as well, so it wasn't as interactive as we had hoped, but we were working on values, which is that second part there. Now that we have a lot of values already mapped in the Kaituna, because you'll feel a little bit like this is a bit of deja vu for Te Maru, because we've been talking about values for seems like years, because you were talking about values when you're developing the Kaituna River document, and we also had visions in that, and we've got a good vision in that. And so that's why it feels a bit like we're going round in circles, because we've also done a lot of work with what was Plan Change 12, was about the Kaituna as well. So it is feeling a little bit repetitive. But what we've got to do is set a vision for the Kaituna River area. So it's exactly the same area. So here we go. So the Kaituna Freshwater Management Unit, and we're calling them draft at this stage, and I don't think that Te Maru will have any problem with us calling this area a freshwater management unit, but some of the other freshwater management units on this map have had small changes since we're talking back in Plan Change 12, but the Kaituna one, as you'll see there, is exactly the same as the Kaituna Co-Governance Group, which we're very familiar with, and it lines up with the river document. So, but what you will see is the next freshwater management unit going to the east is the Waihi estuary, and that has had some changes, because that one was the Pongakawa Waitahanui, and you'll see it's been that's why it's in a draft, is that we still haven't had a lot of conversation with some of the tangata whenua about these lines on the map. So there's plenty of time to have discussions about whether these are the right areas of freshwater management units. But for the purposes of Te Maru, the area is exactly the same as we know it. So remember last hui back in August, we had Gemma and Ashley came along, and we talked about mapping the values on the computer. And as I've said there, we've got lots of values, almost, some of the eastern catchments and some of the western ones we know less about, because we haven't been through the Kaituna set of work that we've already done. So those dots on the maps there happen to be Mahinga Kai, Waitapu and Tauranga Waka, and cultural ones, and I've just picked those out. So plenty of values. We also Ashley talked about the Ngā Taonga Waimari bit, which was a portal that was invite only to tangata whenua, and being able to put dots on maps. That hasn't perhaps had as much feedback added to it as we had hoped, but nonetheless, it's not so much of a problem in the Kaituna. So there's the one, this is the map system that you could add dots to, and as you'll see, there's some dots being added there, and you can zoom in and out of that. So you can still add to that if you go to participate Bay of Plenty Regional Council. You can still add dots to the map if you'd like. But what this paper is really introducing is the new part of the process we've moved on to, which is vision setting. And as I said, it's very prescriptive in the legislation, and we have to end up with a vision, which is a sort of a hierarching, it's an ambitious statement that sits in the regional policy statement as an objective. And we would ordinarily set it at the whole of the freshwater management unit. So for the whole of the Kaituna and its catchment. The whole of the Kaituna and all its tributaries. So it's same level as the Kaituna River document. And it's a lofty statement that is ambitious, so it could look out a number of years, much more years than our 10-year planning cycle. So it could be something that we're reaching for maybe 30, 40, 50 years out. But you still have to be able to actually reasonably meet it. So it's not something that's so far-fetched that we can't work towards it. And then we would have to talk about the actual timeframes, whether it is 30 or 40 or 50. And that depends a lot on the science that we're going to be, our science team are working on at the moment. So, and we would, you'll see in the next couple of slides that we've pulled together some material from existing documents that have aspirations in them as a starting point. And then we go out to community and tangata whenua to work on that vision until we get it sounding about right. So as I said there, we've been pulling together things and we've got a working draft, and every day we'll get closer. The more talk we have about that vision, the more we'll land on a good place about what the community and tangata whenua think is a good stretch goal for the Kaituna. And then the idea would be to take that, talk to iwi and Hapa about it, perhaps have some pānui about it. We could even have a sub-regional hui. There's one being organised for the for Te Arawa up in the Rotorua area at the moment. So that might be something that we seek to do if there's any keen feedback needed on that. So, and we could meet with the with your iwi members as well. And then we'd do a similar exercise that we have with the values, put it out online and seek a bit more wider engagement. So here's the last slide. This is one that we've put together as a starting point. So it is just an example. There's nothing set in concrete here. But I guess what might resonate with you is that because the Kaituna River document has that vision, and you're working on change 5 to get into the regional policy statement, that's a very good place to start because that is the vision for the river. And you have invested a lot of time and money in it, both Te Maru, Regional Council, and also the wider community to get to that vision. So as a starting point, we've used the Kaituna River documents vision and built in a little bit more about linking it through to the estuary. So we're thinking it might be a broad statement such as this one, and it might have some key goals attached, and it could have 7, it could have 3. It doesn't, at this stage, it's a very straw man sort of a thing that we will work on over time. And down the bottom there, we'll have to work with the scientists and also the economists to work out, well, if this is our ambitious if this is our ambitious goal, how likely will it take in terms of the science? What will that mean for land use change? And so that would have an influence on the timeframes. So just sending that signal that that's what we're working on at the moment, and that'll dovetail in with the science work that they're working on at the moment. Ka pai, is there any pānui on that one?
Any pānui? Maru?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you can have an integrated policy like through the RMA, but there has to be a provision for every river has its own mountain, and that would be a variation in your policy. So you can have a policy for the Kaituna River, the Rangiora River and all those rivers. But there's a difference. The difference is that every river has its mountain, and that's the variation in the habitat that goes with a particular river may not be the same habitat as the Rangiora. So these are provisions that you have to adjust. And it goes back to the old Maori gods.
Maru. Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora, Joe. You know, I want to say, oh my God, so I will say, oh my God. Oh my God, I guess at all the rhetoric that you're, looking at what you presented. And I guess my question comes back to where is the role of the river affiliates in this whole process? You know, this looks like a council document to me, and I take on board that it has been written by, you know, our staff, and that's the work that we produce. But, you know, I still have concern around how do we convey this information out to the whānau hapu who are affiliates of the Kaituna River and the role that they play in what we're setting out as part of the implementation plan. Because those of us who are au fait, what's being presented this morning, gives me concerns of how we then go out and convey all of this to the whānau.
Yeah, that's a good question, Councillor McDonald. And I think as we take a lot of the conversations to iwi and hapu, it will be at that higher level and sort of deconstructing the words that we've got on the page and just sharing them with them, how that collation has worked, because those words that I had on the page there, I've pulled, so the desktop collation is pulled from iwi management plans. And so as we go to some of the iwi, we will be able to say that this bit has come from the Ngāti Whakāwai ki Makatu iwi management plan. This bit has come from Ngāti Pikiao's pieces. So when you start looking at all of that, all of these iwi management plans, and we have a lot of them in the Kaituna, there's some really key themes that are coming out, and those broader statements of they do look very wordy on here, but the way we deliver it will be really important, like you're saying, Councillor McDonald. For example, the supporting and thriving mahinga kai comes out really strongly in every iwi management plan that we have in the Kaituna, as well as the treaty settlement legislation, as well as the Kaituna Y4 decision. So I think it's being careful to link this through to the material that iwi and hapu have actually shared with us, rather than making it look like a dull, boring textbook type approach. So yeah, take that on board. And we have our kaupapa Māori work stream and our community engagement team who will work that material up so that it is in the right shape to be responsive to some of the audiences that we're going to. Is Anaru on the line? He may like to elaborate a little bit more on the work that he's doing in that space.
Yep, I'm on the line. So we have presented to Council our engagement program through Te Honua, and I believe Ruben Gardner has also addressed Te Maru a number of times on Te Honua and the Māori engagement plan.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, Joe.
Yes, that's right, as well I mentioned.
So part of the process going forward is to consult and engage and involve tangata whenua, iwi hapu kaitiaki Māori land trusts. So Councillor McDonald will know that through the reports that we have been giving to Council, that's all part of the process of involving tangata whenua. So Te Maru has a role, and speaking to Te Maru as the entity, I believe there's also been an opportunity to consider how Te Maru as an entity would like to be involved in this process as well. I know that you've been heavily involved in Change 5 to the RPS, but the two things are linked via the NPSFM. So those options, I guess, for you to consider on how Te Maru would like to be involved are still on the table. But we are also working with tangata whenua and having a kōrero with them about how they would like to be involved.
Thank you. Did you want to say something else?
Just to say thank you to both. And obviously there is going to be more discussion by us around the Te Maru or Kaituna table, given that we, Te Hononga is Council's engagement tool. So I'm quite happy to wait until we have that discussion amongst ourselves of the role we envisage taking in that whole NPS FM space. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay, if there are no other questions for Joe, we'll move on. But just as we move on, because we're now moving into Te Tinia Tuna, the action plan, and for those of you who've looked through that plan, you'll see there's quite a few red lights around my name. So what that is because I'm not quite up with the thing, but there's a lot of conversation that's going on in the background, and so anyway, I just want to make a point of that. So when Pim's going to present on this, but one of the key things I pointed out, and that I'm, I suppose, highlighting by having a red light is around how Te Maru communicates. And so that is linked with a conversation around Te Maru having a secretariat. And so it's one of the things that I'm quite keen on is exploring how we communicate the information that we're given as a board and how we get that out. And so I don't want to talk too much around ideas around that, but I just want to indicate it now that is something that I'm personally looking at around how messaging is communicated from Te Maru. So on that, I'm going to hand over to Pim. However, I'm just going to Joe for Joe's presentation. I just need a mover. Thank you, Shad. And second, okay, those in favour, against, carried. Okay, so thank you. You can now move on to Pim's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to check in with members whether they need a 2-minute break to get themselves a glass of water or anything like that before I launch into the status report. Are you okay with that? I just feel like we've been going for nearly 2 hours and this is quite a meaty piece of work.
So we're going to have a 2-minute break, eh? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, we're back on. We're at agenda point 10.4, Te Tinia Tuna Kaituna Action Plan. Give it over to Pim to walk us through this. Thank you.
Oh, e mihi ana koutou, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. And I just want to acknowledge the work of Alva Conroy, who is on the Zoom in the ether there in the background somewhere listening, as she was the one that put in many hard yards on writing the report with the assistance of Te Maru members and their staff. So as we go through this, you'll note that there's only one recommendation, which is to receive the report. But because this is the inaugural status report on the action plan, we are very interested in any feedback that you have. I see, for example, Maru using a magnifying glass to read the text, so that might be one thing that you want to feedback to us, that maybe we can increase the text size, but any and all feedback is welcomed. I also just want to acknowledge that Fiona Wood, who's a coordinator at the council, she has put this together and spent quite a few hours, phoning and emailing the various agencies, members, and their staff to try and bring this together. And she's she sent me a list of about 8 questions to run by members to see whether she can make the next one even better, fit for purpose. So things like, have we provided enough detail, too much detail, not enough detail? Are the little graphics or symbols of progress or funding, is that kind of what you want or not? Are there particular measures or ways of reporting on those projects that you'd like to see to give you the kind of oversight at a governance level that meets your needs? So what I'm going to do is not spend the entire time going through the whole status report, because there's 18 projects and there's quite a lot of detail on each one, but I will go through the headers that we've used, and maybe we can select one project to use as a case study to discuss. And I wondered, Mr. Chair, do you have any preferences as to which project we use for that purpose? No? Do any of the members have a favourite project or something that they'd like to focus on as we discuss the status report?
Maybe, because you mentioned Al that is on board. Maybe if we looked at the Patakakai project.
Sure, thank you. So that's project 9, and you'll find that on page 30 of your agenda, on the big A3 set out there. So you'll see project 9 has 3 parts to it, and unfortunately I haven't got the headers across all pages, which is maybe one piece of feedback that we can record, Jenny or Marinda, in the minutes, that we could put those headers on each page of the status report. But the first column is the projects in the first 3 years of the action plan under that heading. So we have, in this case, 3, Kaiawa working group established, and the second one is listed as the same, so that might be a small error, A and B. And then we have priority habitat restoration projects identified. So then you'll see that there are leads identified for each project. And in this case, from your last meeting, you delegated that to Elva. And so she's the lead on all of those 3 on behalf of Te Maru. The next column is an overall project status, and that's just using that standard RAG reporting methodology of green if it's on track, kei te pai, no major worries, amber if it's kind of getting there, but there's 1 or 2 things that might be delaying it or increasing the cost or making it difficult to deliver on, and red if it's stuck or if no progress has been possible for some reason. Then we move into Fiona's donuts, the first of the donuts, and this one is an indication of whether or not the project has been funded by the person or the agency or the member nominally responsible for it in the action plan. So you'll recall in Te Tini Atuna's document, it identifies a member of Te Maru or an agency or a partner who is responsible for that kaupapa. And so what Elva has reported is that for each of those three, you call them take within the kaupapa, they're about 50% funded. So Elva, I'll give you the opportunity to jump in here if you like. Do you want to just comment on that?
Absolutely. And I think the tricky thing with this method of reporting is it depends on the timeframes. I guess, I mean, for us, we've got 100% funding between now and 30th of June. We haven't yet continued our funding applications for subsequent years. So I guess in terms of this reporting sequence, it probably gives the impression that we are 50% we're 50% funded over the next 2 years, which is true, but yeah, I think that's the challenges with working out what timeframes are for the respective reporting periods. I mean, in my view, this is one of these projects that will be continuous, subject to funding. Yeah, so it depends on how you look at
it. I found the same thing with the projects that I was reporting on. So project 1, for example, had some, and 3. And it was hard for me to know whether it was fully funded or not, because as a staff member, it's just my interpretation of what that project's fully funded status might look like. And that really depends on how aspirational the members are with that particular kaupapa. Yeah, so if with some of these things you could change the world, and therefore the funding requirement would be quite substantial, but you could also kind of say, well, it's been done, but at a lower level. So there is a bit of interpretation there. So it might be valuable, this is a suggestion, that rather than just relying on a percentage, that at an appropriate point we identify an absolute value that's, how much is in the budget or has been raised, and what is the nominal value that members consider would represent fully funded. So for example, if Elva's saying it's 50% funded and she's identified that there are X thousand dollars available for that project, she's implying that that project in total is going to cost 100% of that amount. Anyway, whether we might be focusing too much on the financials. You may not be interested in that. But we thought that most project management has those 3 corners of the triangle. There's scope, there's cost, and then there's time. And so we've tried to cover each of those things in this status report. Then if you move across to the right, you'll see that we've identified the funding partners. So in this case, for the Pātaka Kai kaupapa, it's Te Wai Māori and Western Bay Plenty District Council. So both of those entities have made contributions to this kaupapa. And then the next bit is kind of the guts of it. So achievements underway, and Elva's stated there what's happened so far on that project. So interim working group established comprising Te Maru o Kaituna iwi representatives. This group will oversee the establishment of the Pātaka Kai program, which commenced on 1st of October. And then B, it's in progress, and then C, about to commence. So the first suite of priority areas will be identified in the second quarter of 2022, dependent on completion of other tasks such as monitoring and engagement. Elva, you've got something to say about those comments? You've got your hand raised?
Sorry, I was just looking at the column which talked about where we got our funding from, which is great. One thing that it doesn't actually reflect is the non-monetary contributions. I mean, that doesn't get acknowledged. So for example, we're receiving a lot of technical support from Department of Conservation and Bay of Plenty Regional Council, which actually doesn't get reflected in this report.
Is that something that members would like to see on the status report? So other non-financial contributors?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're reporting the feedback? Yes. Thank you. Shall I take a pause there, because that's taken us about halfway across the page for our case study project, and give members the opportunity to provide any feedback on the things that we've talked about so far before we do the second half of it?
See any feedback at this point from members?
Probably a clearer picture on the scope. People will respond to it if it was if the scope was more poetic.
So the scope of the project as it's defined in Te Tiniatuna, or the scope of the work that's been funded and is underway?
The work that's been funded.
Right. Okay. Yep.
It's like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Every little kid knows what Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but if you put it in some brain damaging statement, well then you only get a small part of the community will understand it.
Okay, so a little bit of sort of a reminder of what the action plan said about that project, or at least which part of that project's been funded. Okay, thank you. Any other members' feedback on any of those status report fields that we've used so far? And do I take silence means you're reasonably happy with it? That's good. Okay, so let's move across then to the second half of the page, and you'll see that the next donut there is kind of an overall progress indicator. So the first donut was how much of the project has been funded. The second one is how much progress has been made relative to what was planned or anticipated. And so for the first strand of the Pātaka Kai project, Elva's indicated 10% project progress. Is that correct?
No.
No, sorry, 100%. Yes, and because we're missing a donut. The third one doesn't have a donut. So apologies for that. So we've got maybe we also need some horizontal breaks between projects on the status report so we can follow ourselves across the page. But that project 9 has got a donut for the first work stream, A, and says it's 100% done, which was establish the working group. The second one is...
It was establish the work program.
The work program, okay. Okay, and then the second one is 80% complete, and the third one is missing. I guess is that because it hasn't commenced yet, probably. It's on 0, so we just have to find a way of...
They won't be starting until about April.
Yes.
And probably worth noting, so that's the status report at a certain time. So our work program is now completed. Our work plan.
That's the second one, you mean? The second stream?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. Okay. Yeah, so this is all obviously at the date at which the status report was finalised for entering into the agenda, and it's usually a couple of weeks before the meeting happens, because staff have to compile the data and then put it to the chair for sign off and inclusion, and then it gets sent out to you a week before the meeting. Okay, so let's move across the page a little further. So the next column is planned completion date. You'll see there. So we had 30th of September, 31 October, and then the third one, 30th of June 2022. And I'm guessing here that for some of the bigger, more complicated projects, we might have some, there might be value in indicating indicative interim milestones as well as the final completion date. Some of those projects are sort of 10 years away. Then we move into the opportunities for mātauranga Māori. And this is one where I think this came from feedback at an earlier meeting, that this was something that members wanted identified with each of the projects in Te Tiniatuna. And so what Elva's put into the status report for the Pātaka Kai project is yes, and then talked about the working group. and their help to identify those opportunities. And that flows through all three parts of that Pātaka Kai project. Yeah, I'm interested in your views on that particular field. And then we've got upcoming milestones in the next one. So again, A, B, and C, just a real simple, what's next, what's coming up next. And then the last couple of columns, are there any risks or issues? So Alva's identified ongoing funding to continue the program beyond 2022 as a potential, it's a risk. Delays in recruiting project team members and tangata whenua engagement, that was a risk, which has now been mitigated because that work stream is complete, that B. And C, delays in recruiting project team members and tangata whenua engagement. And so I guess that remains in place, that one hasn't started yet. Finally, 2 to go. So there's next steps, which is kind of similar to the milestones one that I talked about before, but next steps in the kaupapa, and then the owner. So that's sort of Fiona's take and my take on what a status report looks like, with input from many of you, and I acknowledge Matt Layton from Western Bay, especially. Thanks, Matt, for your input, and everybody else around the table here who's provided information for their respective projects. So any feedback on that second half of the status reporting template? Is there too much information, not enough? Any fields there that are not of interest or need more detail?
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Just some personal feedback. It's wonderful to see the detail that's sitting in behind all of the different projects. But from a governance point of view, I find it not particularly digestible in this format. It really takes a lot of reading and a lot of assimilation to get the overall picture. When you get to the end of it, I'm asking myself, okay, what does that mean for the whole program? So I just wonder whether, I think that's very useful, but I just wonder whether a visual presentation, perhaps not over the whole report, but maybe it's chunked up so a portion is done every meeting, so that we get a slightly more colourful picture of what's happening in the different projects, and then maybe just staff can pick out some real things that they want us to be aware of, because really that really is a lot of information. It's quite hard to digest it all. I don't know, others may not feel like that, but it's just me.
I think those are very valid points, Councillor Nees. And I suppose it's if we're at the governance level, then it's the key things we need to be looking at, and maybe staff can identify that. I find this quite good for me, though, to guide me through how the projects work. But I think in a reporting, I do like the idea that you mentioned around maybe just picking key projects to update throughout the year. That's sort of, throughout our hui. And that way we can kind of, I suppose, assess where the project's at. Because I think originally when we asked for this type of reporting, it was so that we could have a kind of a checklist to see where the projects were at what point in that. So I think this is very handy for us, but I think maybe the reporting way on how we report this, whether that comes through your report or an addition to, just my thoughts as well.
So how would members feel, because Fiona and I talked about this, and it could be something that we link with the Secretariat's role coming up. If you selected, for example, based on this report, you pick 3 or 4 that you want us to present either a video update on or some photographs or a bit more information so that you get an insight into the ones that you're either worried about or interested in or proud of or whatever. And then we can go and either with the Secretariat's help or with some of that, some of Fiona's time or some of the time from the individual members, we can bring a video update or a presentation or a few photographs to show people what's going on. And I should apologise. Normally I have tried to do an operations update in this report, so that the paper would be full of photographs and so on of what the regional council's been doing that's of interest in Te Maru Zurohe. I chose not to do that this time because I kind of didn't want to present all that on top of the status report, which was, as Councillor Mees has identified, pretty information heavy already. So if we were to do that and you were to say, okay, based on the status report, you guys, as part of your resolution, say pick, we want to hear about projects 1, 7 and 9 next time around in more detail, then we can bring that, real insight type thing, even if it's a video interview with the person who's doing the mahi. So I know, Councillor McDonald, you've got your hand up, but Councillor Nees, can I just ask you, because this would make life easier for Fiona anyway, do you think that there are things in the status report that should be removed for simplicity?
I guess staff are needing to gather this information anyway. There is so many different columns and so much information, and it could be that, as you say, having lines to delineate the different projects so you can actually follow it more easily might make it a little bit more digestible as well, but it is quite dry. So I like your suggestion that we perhaps have a presentation of things that the members of Te Maru are interested in finding a little bit more, getting a bit more colour about.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald, what were you going to suggest?
I just want to support that whole idea of the visuals. I mean, that's probably life-saving for some of us who get bogged down in the rhetoric. And I think, and I've got no issue with what's being presented in the written form, but I just think that we could be presenting it a wee bit better for those of us sitting around the table to come with the visuals, as you do with your reports, and even some video coverage if that is even possible. And I try and encourage all staff, irrespective of what committee you're bringing to us, to use a video as well as the written, because not only that too, the actually seeing it actually stays embedded in our minds. Well, for the likes of me anyway, a lot better sometimes than just reading the rhetoric. It's what you see and what we can quickly relate to what's being told to us in the written. So yeah, fully support visuals coming with these very deep written reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant, Councillor Daly.
Yeah, thank you. I think the spreadsheet it's got all the detail as said, and you can find the information if you zoom in and look for what you're looking for. Maybe, as has already been said, in terms of lines separating each project, and maybe the project name aligning with A rather than being in the middle. But if there's lines, that won't be a problem. But the other thing was maybe following it could be one pager for each project with all the information summarised on one page, and so then you can look at the whole lot and zoom in and compare them. And then if you want to zoom in on something, you look at one page. It'll tell you everything on that project.
I totally agree. Because there is one project that I was very interested in, and of course it's splattered in here, and that's Kokurua, what's called the Kokurua stream. I would have liked to see that on a separate page, because it's something that I'm quite interested in, and there's a lot there that I'm not interested in. But if I was wanting to do a comparison on each of the projects, then this is an ideal document. It's an ideal document, but you need to project by project, because half of them you have no interest in.
Okay, so is that a general feeling from councillors that would create an 18-page status report? But happy to take that feedback on board if it makes it easier to get something meaningful out of it, and it's just a different way of presenting what's currently in the spreadsheet. Shared.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's a bit of a balance between people wanting detail and then people just wanting a summary. And so maybe if we do both, kind of have that upfront overall kind of summary using the different keys, the different methods that you're trying to summarize. I mean, this is a reporting mechanism to show, how are things tracking. This is where we are. Well, actually, this is where we are currently. This is where we are currently. This is where we're progressing to. These are some of the key actions, and these are the key risks. So kind of summarising that, and then if people want the detail, like what Maru mentioned, then maybe have that appended. That's just my thoughts.
So Dean has just suggested that we make it digital so that you can, it's got the sort of a few summary fields for each project, and if you want to go to the whole page, you click on the link, or is it, yeah, it is.
So I suppose just listening for the report that we received, a summary page highlighting, but then for more detail, if we need to do it digitally, it's really just to save trees and less paper for me. But if we need to delve into anything, then we can just pull it up via digital, have a closer look at the project, the outcomes, and that. Otherwise, we're just getting that one pager. And whether the format is a one pager per project, or whether in the table position, I think just to save packages for those of us who have paper ones, probably easier if we did that digitally at Hui. Grant, Councillor Daly.
Yeah, Dean, I always look at it digitally, I suppose. I don't get emailed, I don't get mailed a hard copy, but unless I'm at a meeting. But so I'm just thinking the way Western Bay does their agendas, obviously we use Stella Library, and we'll have our main agenda, and then there'll be a reference to the agenda item. We might have a breakout report as a separate document within Stella, and maybe this would be good to have it as a standalone document outside of the agenda. So it makes it a bit easier to navigate the agenda as well, I guess.
Yep, that's good. Yep. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I think we've given enough feedback to Pim, and he can relay that to Fiona. And but I just want to thank Fiona and Pim for the work that they do. It's tremendous that we can, because even though we've been discussing this for a while, we've moved quite quickly over the last 3 years. And so, and a lot of that is due to staff hours and work and advising. So I just want to make a mention of all the staff that are part of this and those who are brought in from Kaituna, like the likes of the Alva and etc., in supporting and getting this project, I suppose, stabilised in how we move forward. Just a little bit of an update before I ask for someone to move. That's around the Secretariat. So I had a meeting yesterday with the Maramina and Bronco as the new chairperson for the Rangitaiki, and with council staff from Regional Council around that. So we have drafted up the role of what the Secretariat should be covering, and some of that may fall into what we've just seen. One of the key areas I'd like that person to do, or people or group to do, is communicate. You look at how communications have been done for the Kaituna, etc., but also around identifying the commonality between the two river governance entities and how we work together on those sorts of issues as well. So at the moment, there is a little bit of work where we're just doing some comparative work with the Auckland Maunga Trust, the joint Maunga Trust up in Auckland, because they also are proposing a secretariat for their governance group as well. So we're just doing a bit of due diligence around that sort of thing, and then we should have some answers soon. So just on that, I just want to ask for a mover for the Te Tini Tuna Action Plan. Will someone move? Shared. And second, Councillor McDonald, Matimuana. Kia ora. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. 10.5, update from proposed change 5. Moana.
This report, while it's short, it is quite timely, and I'll refer you to page 36 and the diagram that's shown there, because that gives you a good overview of this process as we transition into the freshwater planning process. On the 21st of May, I provided members with an overview of this new national process. It begins with Schedule 1, submissions, preparation of the plan. We have gone through public notification in June, 29th of June. We have received 15 submissions, and my report on the 27th of August provided an overview of those submissions. Since then, the tangata whenua nominations have closed. 4 were received by iwi members of Te Maru o Kaituna. One of those nominees is no longer available. We've also received a nomination from Ngāti Rangi Wiwihi. The further submission period ran from the 26th of October to the 9th of November, and 8 further submissions have been received. Of those, 7 were from original submitters. So we only have 1 new submitter through this letter process, which means there are 16 submitters on proposed change 5. The transition that's happening now is that we're now moving towards providing the Chief Freshwater Commissioner with information so that he can convene a freshwater hearings panel to hear this change 5. And the only other comment I would make is we've tried to illustrate, similar to how I did in my presentation on the 21st of May, who's responsible at each stage, who's wearing the porto, as I put it. I'm now available for any questions should you have any.
Any questions for Moana? No? Well done.
Oh, kia
ora. Can I have somebody move Moana's report? Move. Denise, second. Manu, Uncle, Manu Penny, second. Those in favour, is carried. Okay, thank you, Moana. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Point 11, this is to public excluded section. So this has to, this is part of the minutes in the yellow part of the document. I'm not quite sure what the digital one looks like, but we have to transfer that into public. Is that right? Just the resolution, and that is, the resolution is, what is the resolution? Okay. So we need someone to move and a seconder to move this into public exclusion. So can I have a move?
I'll move, Dean, that we move. We move into public exclusion.
And second, Shad? Yeah, thank you.